All right, so we are now officially live. All right, so my name is Jamie, and I am the developer advocate for Nimbella. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our webinar to discuss what serverless is, how it can benefit you, and by the end of it, um, how you can actually get started building your first serverless application. Now, I'd like to go ahead and introduce two people that were going to be joining us. Roderick, go ahead and tell us a little about yourself.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm one of the co-founders of Nimbella. One of my roles before starting this company was IBM, where I was part of the IBM Cloud Functions team that launched the IBM serverless offerings. I've worked with a number of customers who are interested in serverless and helped them figure out how to be successful on their serverless journey. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of what we've learned with the audience.
Nice. And I'm also teamed up with the team lead, Nikhil. Nikhil, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little about yourself as well?
Sure. Thanks, Jamie. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I am Nikhil. I am from Bangalore, India. I work as a tech lead at Nimbella, and I have about 9 years of work experience in cloud technologies, both private and public cloud. I've been interested in serverless for about close to 2 years now, and after using it for some time, I feel that it's an excellent way of writing cloud applications, and hopefully by the end of this webinar, all of you feel the same as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikhil. So we're going to get started with Roderick discussing about what serverless is and how it can benefit you. But before I do that, I want to let you know the agenda. So we're going to go with Roderick explaining what serverless is and how it benefits. Nikhil, in the end, after that, will tell you how to actually build serverless applications within Slack. And then we'll go ahead and have a 5-minute Q&A with any questions we might have left over. And once that's done, we are going to be discussing an ability to win a $100 gift card for the serverless application that you create. And we'll have more details about that later. But for now, let's go ahead and jump in with Roderick and have him start his presentation.
All right, great. Is the screen share active yet, Jimmy?
Let me go ahead and there you go. Your screen is now taking up the full screen.
Okay. I'm just going to wait a second. There we go. All right. So part of this talk in the beginning will be an introduction to serverless. Serverless has been around for about 5 years, or that word has entered the lexicon, somewhere between 4 and 5 years ago, and has really grown in terms of what it means and how developers can actually take advantage of this technology and extract value out of it. So what I'm going to give you is an introduction into serverless and what does it mean for building cloud applications. I think a large part of our theme here is the cloud can seem complicated, and part of our mission at Nimbella is to make it easy for developers to deploy their applications, to build their applications, to operate their applications. And moreover, we want to make the cloud accessible to diverse skill sets and diverse backgrounds in terms of abilities and capabilities. And so, spoiler alert, the question, do you need a PhD to build cloud applications? The answer is an emphatic no. And part of our mission here is to deliver on that emphatic no. And I'm going to give you an example later of how we're doing that, and Nikhil will follow this up with another way of also reinforcing the same point. But the reason the answer has to be no is because there's a number of things happening in the world today. There's an interesting analysis and a presentation by Professor Heather Miller. She's a professor at CMU, Carnegie Mellon University. Gave a talk sometime last year at a conference called Rebase. And part of her talk was looking at how many developers are essentially coming into our field and how many job openings are computer related into the future. And one of her takeaways, and the point that she kept making, was that in just about 6 years, there'll be 3.5 million computing-related job openings in the US. A lot of this data is based on US-centric numbers. And of those numbers, we just simply don't have enough talent to essentially fill all those capabilities if you strictly look at people who are coming out with computer science degrees. And even if you bundle in the number of developers who are coming out from graduate coding boot camps, that number is still very small. It's in the hundreds of thousands. And if you look at the gap between the available talent and the demand that will arise in a few years, we have a significant gap. So part of what has to happen is essentially demystifying the cloud and demystifying cloud computing so that you can actually take advantage of a much broader skill set of developers. This is further reemphasized by a Stack Overflow survey just last year, which looked at how many years of developer experience do people think they have. And 41% of respondents out of 74,000 responses said that they have about 5 years of professional coding experience or less. So, if you're talking about the explosion of what's happening with cloud computing and the whole world essentially moving towards remotely distributed applications that run in the cloud on somebody else's infrastructure, we have to narrow the gap in terms of skill sets that are available so that people can take advantage of these compute capabilities. It can't be that it's only available to developers with extensive experience in the cloud. That just fundamentally has to change. If you're interested in some of these details, I've provided a pointer to Heather's presentation in its entirety. It's available on SlideShare. There's another shift that's actually happening, which is driving some of the changes from another dimension, and that's the cloud computing landscape itself is changing. So what do I mean by this? And in fact, you could argue that things have already changed, whether it's from the developer needs that are arising, the needs of employers in terms of being able to fill roles, and in terms of what's happening in the cloud. We're already facing a much different landscape than we were last year. And part of what's happening is that automation and abstraction have been essential to the evolution of computing. We started with on-prem infrastructure, where to run your application, you needed something like a mainframe, for example, or you needed to buy machines and put them in your lab, and you built your own data centers. And incrementally over time, there's been a shift towards infrastructure as a service. So rather than buying machines and building your own data center, you rented machines from somebody else who specialized in building data centers. And there's mega cloud providers today that do this extremely well: Amazon, Microsoft, Google, IBM, DigitalOcean, just to name some. And increasing automation and abstraction was seen in things like platform as a service, Heroku, for example. And there's lots of examples of this over time. And it wasn't just that they added automation and abstraction over time, but they've also changed the economics. So rather than paying money for a machine, very expensive, you were able to tap into an economic model where you paid per hour for the resources that you used. And what's happened in the last 5 years is an actual, even more fine-grained shift towards something called function as a service, where you don't pay per the hour necessarily, but you pay per request. So imagine, for example, that you have a function. This is a function shown here in Node.js. It's a simple function, just receives, accepts no arguments, and returns a JSON response that has one field called message and the string hello world. Imagine if this function was instantly reactive. It lived in the cloud, and every time an event triggered it, it ran instantly, without you having to worry about provisioning any kind of other runtime resource infrastructure to run it. And so this is function as a service. It's instantly reactive functions in the cloud. The function lives in the cloud. Events come in, they trigger the execution, or they trigger an activation of this function, and the function produces a response. There's many kinds of events that you can think of. An HTTP request is one. I'm going to show you an example here. Slack messages, if you're familiar with Slack, will be another, and Nikhil will talk about that later. Text messages, a Twitter feed, an Instagram post, file upload, IoT sensor reading, a number of events out there. In fact, what makes function as a service interesting is that you can put it in the context of lots of event-rich ecosystems and make those events actionable. Now you can perform computation on those events and perform some actions on them. So how do you do serverless? Well, step one is you write a function, like the let hello world function that I just showed you. And step two is effectively you're done. And if there's participants on the call who'd like to do some, who'd like to participate, open this link, bit.ly/hellofn. And you'll see a function that I've deployed, which is essentially just saying hello. You can pass in a query parameter to that function and see it essentially returning your name. So this is essentially it. This is serverless, right? I've written a function and I've deployed it. It's living in the cloud. I'm not worried about how many people are actually running this function. I'm not worried about scaling my infrastructure to meet demand. All of that is done for me. And that's part of what the serverless benefits are. And so, this might be interesting in its own, but you could even see it for yourself so that you can believe it. Right? And so you can go to our playground on Nimbella.com, and so there's a bit.ly link for that, and you can try it yourself. Create a function. So once you land in the playground, you'll see a screen that looks like this. And you can do a number of functions, not just in JavaScript, but we have a number of other languages supported. And then you can click run. And that's it. You've just run your first serverless function. So hopefully some of you are trying this out and seeing what it's like. Moreover, it's not that you can just play with functions here and run them, but you can actually publish them. So if you click the publish link, what will happen is you'll see a URL that's provided for you. This is your function. You've just written a function, exported it as an API. You can take this URL and put it as part of your application somewhere if you're developing a quick prototype. And you can now use it as an API call from, say, a front-end application in the browser, calling out to the backend. And it's not that you can just do this with JavaScript. So I'm going to just break out of my screen for a second and show you. You can do this for a number of other languages. So maybe you like TypeScript. You can do this for TypeScript. And you'll notice TypeScript takes a little bit longer than JavaScript, and that's because the code has to be compiled. And the first time you run it, it's a little bit slow, so it took about 5 seconds. But the second time I run it, it's much faster. I could do it for other languages. So Swift, maybe you're interested in mobile development, and you want a serverless backend to essentially support your app. So if you're developing for iOS, Swift is a good target for that, and you're familiar with that language. So you can slap in some Swift code in here, and you can run it just the same way as you'd run JavaScript. Again, this code needs to be compiled, but serverless just takes care of that for me. And you'll see Swift is also a little bit slow because of that initial compilation time that has to happen. I'm going to move on to JavaScript, to Java. So here's an example of Java. You could do this for Go or even PHP. And a nice feature of this function as a service model is that it automatically scales. As more demand arrives, more events, more functions execute. And I don't need to worry about how many functions are being run in how many different instances, how many servers I need. All of that is now burden that I shift to the cloud developer, to the cloud provider. Nimbella, for example. None of the code I just showed you had any server logic, right? I didn't bind a particular route that said, here's a server, it must listen on a port. I didn't specify a route that I want my server to listen to and then activate a particular handler. I simply wrote my function, and the rest was done for me. Moreover, you'll notice that as I was going through the example, it's not that there wasn't any server logic at all, but there was no infrastructure at all. Sorry, I'm noticing a little lag, so I'm going to slow down my rate of speech. There's no infrastructure at all. I didn't provision a server. I didn't create an account on a cloud provider. I didn't say, here's the OS I want to run. I didn't say what node version I wanted to run. I didn't manage any databases. I didn't handle any logging infrastructure, et cetera. So it really comes down to your code and nothing but your code. And I think this is part of the beauty of serverless computing and why it's so powerful. And as I showed you with the playground, it's not that you just can do this with one language or a couple of languages, but you can do this with any number of languages. I showed you examples of Python, Java, Swift, Go, PHP, and that's just a subset of languages that you could do this for. If your language is not on the slide, it's not because it's not supported. And you can even, if you're familiar with Docker containers, you can package up essentially your function inside your own custom container and run that as a function, if you will. So there's a lot of flexibility here in terms of how you can use this programming model, and it really goes to essentially exposing this power of using the right language for the job. If you're doing something with machine learning and the libraries that you need to use are in Python, then you should build your application in Python. If you're doing mobile development and essentially you need to use Swift, then you should build with Swift and integrate with essentially the larger application that you're running. And this is serverless, right? It's the ability for you to focus on your code and just your code. And moreover, it's not that you're just focusing on your code, but you're deploying applications that are native to the cloud. They are they're cloud native by construction, right? It's not an application that you then have to worry about, how do I deploy this to the cloud? How do I scale it up? How do I secure it, etc. All of that is done by essentially construction when you're building your application. And what serverless really comes down to is essentially not just a development methodology, but it's a set of principles that you espouse and try to essentially amplify. And that comes down to focus. Focus on what is the value you're trying to create and how you want to deliver it to your end users, right? So create faster, deliver with greater agility. I touched a little bit on some of the serverless benefits, essentially this ability to free yourself from the burden of worrying about all infrastructure. The model of computing is reactive. So as you get events, functions execute. As you get more events, it just automatically scales in the cloud. Because you're operating and you're coding and you're developing less code, it's more secure. You're essentially offloading the burden to securing how your code runs, how the machine is patched, the security vulnerabilities of the operating system or even the microprocessor are no longer your burden. They're handled for you by the cloud providers. And the last point is that with serverless, one of the interesting points I made earlier about the economic model changing as you go with increasing automation abstraction is it's a utility-based model where you can pay at a very fine-grained level, essentially per request. So this is kind of like paying your electricity bill. If you don't use any electricity, your costs are essentially very low to zero. And the more electricity you use, your costs increase. This is attractive for a lot of developers, especially as they're starting out, where they're cost sensitive. You just have an idea, it hasn't proven itself out yet. You don't want to be paying for expensive infrastructure to see if your idea has legs. Instead, you want your costs to grow as you have more adoption, more users, more traction. And that's a better problem to have. So part of serverless is also addressing some of these economic pain points. And part of this scalability, I just wanted to give some concrete numbers in terms of what you get out of the box. And if you were to build with serverless applications on Nimbella or on any of the other cloud providers like Amazon, they offer a Lambda service, IBM Cloud Functions, Google Functions, Azure Functions, you get a lot of concurrency essentially out of the box. Right? So you can create a function and then you can scale up many instances of that function up to 1,000 within seconds. And it's incredibly cheap. Right? So you can run about 1 million operations, essentially 1 million invocations of your function for about a quarter, 25 cents. Now, this isn't for all functions. It's for a particular kind of function that doesn't consume more than 128 megabytes of heap space and runs for a particular duration. But it just gives you a flavor for the kind of cost that you might see in terms of this model of computing. But it's not just for essentially the cloud novice developer. Serverless has really gone to the enterprise as well. And there's a number of companies, many whose logos you'll recognize, who have adopted serverless and have published case studies for Amazon Web Services in terms of how they've started their serverless journey, how far along they are in the serverless journey, or how serverless has really transformed their internal organizations and IT organization, where small teams are able to deliver significant value that in some cases changes the entire organizational proposition for their end users. So how are they delivering value to their end customers? And they're able to do it with incredible focus, much smaller teams, and much faster than anything else that's been done before. So serverless is ready for the enterprise, and it's also something that's accessible for end users, for developers of many different skill sets. And it's also seeing incredible amount of growth. So from 2015 to 2020, roughly a 5-year period, there's been exponential growth in terms of how many functions are run on one of these functions of service backgrounds. So in 2015, for example, 2 billion serverless functions a day were run on top of AWS Lambda. In 2020, that number is 2 trillion or more a month. We don't know the exact number. Amazon occasionally speaks to how much load they're generating. So this is essentially a 5x increase, an exponential growth over 5 years in terms of how much load is being handled today. This itself, it might sound like a lot, but it's still a tiny fraction of the total compute that's done in the cloud today. So serverless, it's still in its infancy in terms of where it will eventually go. But while it's easier, while it's faster, and I think desirable because it has lots of interesting properties, I think fundamentally serverless is necessary, right? Going back to one of the earlier points I made about, there's an explosion of new developers that will essentially land into the world with capabilities that they can apply to fill some of those job openings within the next 5 to 6 years. You have to be able to address the diverse skill sets, diverse capabilities that are coming online. So part of the necessity is being driven by the amount of people that are coming with different kinds of compute skills. Moreover, I think it makes the cloud accessible. Right? Now, any kind of developer can build a cloud application, deploy it to the cloud, and have a lot of the same benefits that exist for the enterprise as well. So I think all of this means is that serverless is inevitable. And what I'm going to conclude with here in terms of the first part is it's not just about functions, right? I showed you an example of functions just to get the point across that it's simple. You just write a small bit of code and you deploy it. Jamie, is there an issue? No. You write a small bit of code and you deploy it, and you're ready essentially to have a cloud native experience. So some of what we have on GitHub are richer examples. So if you're into participation during this webinar, you can click on this link, bit.ly/webinar-hello. And that will take you to an application, a very simple application that I created that essentially counts the number of visitors to the page. And what's unique about this application is that it's just your code. It's this very simple HTML file. And there's a couple of functions on the back end that display how many unique visitors are to the page and when did I deploy this page last. And you'll see that I'm able to essentially deploy this application from my browser. So this is the Nimbella workbench. You can log into the workbench and then just say project deploy and give it a link to your GitHub project or somebody else's GitHub project. And it just deploys into your namespace. You get a URL that is your own. It's HTTPS secure. And it's making API calls. You don't have to worry about how to set all of that up. And if you go look on GitHub into what actually exists in this project, well, it's just my index file and the logo, and then my 2 functions here implemented in PHP to do the backend API calls. So some of what you no longer have to do or have to worry about, cores, getting a domain name, securing it with SSL, how your functions are running, the servers, a lot of the things that we talked about. Right? So this is now all burden that you've shifted to somebody else. And we have a number of examples on Nimbella.io that you can try out. An optical character recognition is kind of fun to play with. Take an image and drop it in there and see what kind of text is recognized. This is using a machine learning model called Tesseract. And there's a number of other demos that we've published onto GitHub that you can try out as well. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to transfer to Nikhil, who's going to tell you about Nimbella Commander, which is a way of running serverless apps from Slack in essentially one click.
Thank you, Roderick. Jimmy, is my screen visible? Yeah, thanks. Commander is a way of platform which we have written in order to create and run serverless commands. And one way of doing it is you can go to our website, go to product, click on Commander for Slack, and just click on the button. And once you do click on the button, you are going to be redirected to your Slack screen, and this is the message you are going to get. And before I explain how to create commands from using Commander, I would like to explain what Commander is. Commander is a serverless app which is built on top of our Nimbella platform. It allows you to create and run custom serverless commands from Slack and potentially other integrations. We have started with Slack, and I'll show you how you can create commands from Slack. Before I show that, I would also like to mention what are slash commands. Slash commands are a way which Slack provides in order to call or communicate with your apps. So when you type in slash here, you get a bunch of options, and you can choose which command you want to run. And for Commander, it's NC, which stands for Nimbella Commander. And when you type in NC and press enter, it's going to hit the Commander endpoint, and it's going to invoke and run our serverless function. So let's get started and create our first serverless command. And again, we use NC and we do command create. And let's create a command called as hello. And once you type in command hello, it's just created as a serverless function from Slack, and you can run the command with NC hello. And the cool thing about this is it just gave us a response. The cool thing about this is you can just click edit the code and it will redirect you to a browser. It's a code editor, and you can potentially select, you can just choose what the language you want in and what the code. So this is a simple JavaScript function which returns a JSON object. So a serverless function takes in a JSON object and returns a JSON object. And you can potentially just modify this. This is a default response, and click on save and go back to Slack and rerun the command, and it's just going to be there. So, and it just edited the command, and you did all of this. We could do all of this without having any sort of server or anything other than just using Slack and code editor, an online code editor. So that's a simple command. What if you want to create a command which has which takes in multiple parameters, right? You just don't want to create a simple command. Let's say you want to create a command called echo, which takes a message and returns a message. So you specify a message like this. So I'll just do command create. So, and it's going to take in a message input. So we just created a command called echo. If you try to run the command as just nc echo, it's going to throw you an error because you haven't passed the message. So let's just echo the message which it receives. So here, let me just zoom my screen, and instead of returning command text, let me return message. Click on save, go back to Slack and run nc echo. Say, oh, hello world. I need to send a message. And it just echoed hello world. And we just wrote two commands which are run as serverless functions on JavaScript without having to need any sort of infrastructure, and we did it from Slack. So what if you have a bigger use case? What if you want to create a set of commands which are related? So in order to do that, we have something called as command sets, and command sets are a way of creating a different set of commands and grouping them together. So we have something called as command set registry, which we publish on our GitHub, and this is free, and these are the different set of commands or command sets we have. So the cool thing about this is it's all set of commands. So if I click on let's say GitLab, and if I go here to GitLab, and these are the different set of commands, and you can go ahead and change the commands, see the code, and just try to understand how this works. So let's go ahead and install one of the command sets which might be relevant for the current situation, and it's and it's done via CSM command. CSM stands for command set management. When you type in /nc CSM, it's going to show you all the available command sets. So you can just choose which command set you want to install. So not only will you be able to create your own commands, you will be able to install public command sets, and you can think of command sets as something like npm packages. And CSM is a way of command set manager. It's similar to npm, where you can just install and run different commands. So let's just install one such command, which is corona stats, nc CSM install. We will install the command set and type in corona stats. And it just installed the corona stats command, and this particular command set just contains one command. So if we want to run the command, we just do nc corona stats and specify the region, specify the country, and it just outputs you the stats. So it just shows how many cases are there and how many people have recovered, and a nice graphs which is also rendered here as well. So not only can you specify different countries, you can also edit the code. So you can just do command code corona stats. So currently you can specify 2 countries where you can kind of get the region also. So if I do nc corona stats stats India, I can specify a region which is, let's say, K for Karnataka. It's going to show in my region, and this is what we have built for our case. Maybe you want to print and you want to create a command for your country and your region, and the way for you to do it is just do command code and give the command name which you want to edit. So you type in command code corona stats, and it's going to give you the code to edit. And you can potentially edit this code. You can make changes to however you see fit. If you have added a feature, you can make a pull request and send us a PR, and we can merge it. If it's a feature for something which is which is for your own purpose, you can go ahead and make the change as well. And once you make the changes, just click on save and go back, and you will be able to run your updated command. And not only will you be able to install the commands, you can also do nc csm install csm update, which updates the particular command set. So when you type in nc corona stats update, it's going to update. So if any changes happens on the GitHub this thing, so it's going to do an update of that particular command set as well. So maybe you want to create a command set and you want to create it on your public repository. So CSM also installs command sets from public repository. All you have to do is you need to just specify the link. So you can do nc csm install GitHub and specify the username. This is my username, and specify the command set. So I just do image analyzer, and it's installed the command set from my public repository, which is this one. So this is a command. This has just a single command which analyzes. It takes in a URL and analyzes the commands. And this particular command, again, I can show the source code here. You can go ahead and look at the source code. You can install it from different URLs as well. So this command takes in a URL. So let's just see what the command does. So if I do command code image analyzer and click on edit the code, you see that it just renders, and it requires a particular API key. So it's called a visual recognition API. So we can potentially put in order to run this code, we needed an API key from Watson service. So it's not really safe to put the key within the code. So we have security built in as well, which is called as secrets. So when you try to run this particular command, let me just get the URL here. So if I try to run this particular command, just taking a while. It says visual recognition API secret is missing. The reason why you see this error is because we have not added what this value needs to be, and we need to add this securely so that it is basically it's encrypted. So what you do is nc secret create, and this allows you to create your own secret for your API keys. So you can just go back here, click on this, the name of the secret, and the secret value. So and click on make secrets. So this is going to take in this particular value as the key, and this is the value, and you can just do a clipboard copy, go back to Slack, and just paste it here. And it has created a secret for you. So when you run this command again, so it's going to analyze. So it's going to say it's a cat, feline, carnivore. So let's just click on the link to see if it is true. It seems to be pretty accurate there. So it's just analyzed it as cat, feline, carnivore, and all. And the cool thing about this is this visual recognition API is a secret. So when you do secret list, you wouldn't know what the value is because it's encrypted. So it's just going to show you some value which is hashed, So you can create secrets securely without having to leave Slack environment. So this is one of the features which is built in. The another feature which we have is basically access control. So I installed Commander, so that makes me an admin, but I have Jamie on the call also. So Jamie, do you want to try and run this image analyzer command in this general channel? So what we do is we provide access control. So Jamie did try to run this command, and it says it doesn't have the permission to execute this command, and the reason is because as an admin I have not given him rights. So this is another important feature which is built in, which you get it, which is you can control as an admin as to who can run the command, who can edit the command, and who can create and install the commands. So I'll just do command runners. This is and I'll just add Jamie. I can do at Jamie, or I can just do at anyone as well. So this is another way. So I'll just do anyone. So anybody can run the command. Oh, I just forgot to give the command name. So I'll do image analyzer. Image analyzer. That's anyone. Yeah. So it says anyone can run the command. So Jamie, can you try running the command again? And is able to run the command, and this is the access control which is built in. Command runners indicates how many who can run the commands. So what I can do as well is I can make Jamie an admin. So I'll just do app admins, and it will show me as an admin. So the access rights of an admin is that not only can he run the commands, he can install the commands, he can do CSM install, he can do command create, and he can do whatever he wants. If you are not an app admin, you can only choose based on what the admin gives you rights to do. So I can add Jamie as an admin here by just doing Jamie Dawson here, and it gets added. So we have two admins for Nimbella Commander right now. So yeah, so we not only we have secrets, we have access control also, where you can choose which user wants to run the command and from where. So along with access control, we also have logging. So I want to see like who ran this image analyzer or log. So I just do command log, and I just give the name of the command. So image analyzer is the name of the command. So I do nc command log image analyzer, click on enter, and it shows like who are the users who ran the command. So it shows Jamie ran the command, it shows I run this command. So it has, not only do you get access control, you also get logging. So you can do user logging, you can do not only can you do command logging, you can also do app log. So when you type in app log, it shows you the entire instances of the commands which was run. So like from top to bottom, it's going to show you which commands were run and by whom. So as an admin, it's useful to know as to who ran the command and at what time. It's going to be a time zone specific. So this is based on my time zone as to where I am. So if Jamie runs the command, it's going to be under his time zone. So you also get logging. And one of the another important features which we think is important is for developers to create commands is the debugging feature. So what we do is we have let's say we created the command code hello. Let's say you go to the code and you want to make some changes, and instead of you made an error, right? So let's say you just, instead of doing this, you typed command and you save the command and you try to run the command, and it's going to throw you an error saying that command text is not defined. So you get the response back in Slack. So what you can do is that you realize that the command text is not fixed, so you just fix it. And maybe you also want to add some console log, so you can do that. You can do console log params. So you can fetch the log after you run the command. So when you run this command, you will not see a log, but we provide a command in order to fetch the log. So this just echoes the command. So you can just do nc activation log. So the activation log, what it does is it tries to fetch the log for the last executed command. In our case, it was hello. So it executed the command, and these are all the parameters as well. So this, as a developer, you don't have to you don't have to leave the Slack workspace to get the logging. So you get it within Slack again and again without having to maintain and run servers. So you can not only develop different commands, you can group those commands as command set and publish them not only in your private or public repository, but within our command set registry as well. So it allows you to create different sort of commands and command sets. So you can write your command set once and you can potentially run anywhere. So I'll just show you how you can run it anywhere. And for that, we also have a command called as API get. And with API get, what you get is an API as to, you get a curl command as to how you can run the command. So let's say we have a message echo hello. And this gives you the different command parameters and the API which you can invoke and you can curl. So I can just copy paste this. I can go to my terminal and I can run curl command. And you got the response not only on Slack but on your terminal as well. So you potentially, what this means is the commands which you run or the command types, command sets which you run can potentially run anywhere. Not just on Slack, but you can run them as serverless commands on your terminal. Maybe you can and this is secured as well. So you need to specify your username and password in order to run this command, or else you wouldn't be able to do it. And that way you kind of get the security as well. You can potentially plug in this particular command into your website as a button, and when somebody clicks on it, it's going to run the command, and you have done this without having to maintain the code anywhere, or without having to maintain the server anywhere, or having to do anything other than just write the logic for your functions. So we have different set of commands. Feel free to contribute to them. Feel free to explore them. And I guess that's it from my side. Probably Roderick, do you want to share something?
Yep, thank you. I'm gonna just switch back to finishing the presentation, and then we can take some questions. I'm just gonna wait for the screen to refresh. All right. So I think, in this talk, you got two pieces of information. One is what is serverless, and I think this is the idea that serverless is really a development methodology that helps developers get into cloud development without a lot of the burden that you normally have to do to deal with cloud development. The cloud is complicated, but it doesn't need to be. I think serverless is one of the answers for that. And your serverless journey can start with just one function, whether you do it from the Nimbella playground. Notice there was no login required. If you've tried it, you could just write a function, export as an API endpoint right now, no barriers. Or you can try it from Slack. I think the Slack use case is an interesting one in that it lets you bring APIs to where you might be spending time with others in your organization or collaborating with other developers on a particular project. And you could essentially create functions, or you can create entire projects out of this as well. So Nimbella Commander offers you a way of also getting into serverless from an environment that might be interesting to you and where you're spending some of your time in terms of workflow. And our goal at Nimbella is really to make the cloud easy, so that development is at the speed of innovation. You shouldn't, once you have an idea, you shouldn't be bogged down by figuring out, well, how do I get started? What cloud do I go on? What accounts do I need? Do I need a database? Do I need an object store? Do I need a CDN? How do I get a domain name? How do I secure it with SSL? There's a lot of things that you start asking questions to that you need answered before you've even written a line of code. And part of what we've tried to convey to you here is, if you have an idea, you can just start with just one function. You can grow into an entire project. You can deploy with just one instance. You can share those projects out of GitHub and collaborate with others. And it's really about decreasing the amount of code that you have to develop, the amount of infrastructure that you have to even think about, and lowering the burden on you as a developer so you can focus on what is of value to you, which is innovate. Right? The infrastructure is someone else's headache. It's our headache at Nimbella. It's Amazon's headache. It's IBM's headache. It's Google's headache, and that's what they're really good at. And they have the skills, the expertise, data centers, investments to provide the infrastructure, but that infrastructure is increasingly a commodity. And serverless makes it a reality that developers from various skill sets and various backgrounds can really get into the cloud and build something awesome. So Jamie, I'm going to hand off to you at this point. We're finished with the technical content.
All right, so in the chat, we actually got a few questions, and I was hoping to see if we can go ahead and answer them. So one of the questions we got was, I have a question regarding latency. If I have a function which gets the data from DB hosted in a different machine, iterates through the records and gives me output, what if there are 1,000 requests in a minute? Will there be any latency? I think he's mostly focused on like latency issue.
Right. So serverless, and maybe we made it seem like too much like magic. And the idea is to make it look like magic, but there are resources behind every function execution that have to be provisioned by the cloud provider. And if you generate too much load, then you will see latency increase as the cloud provider has to provision more resources to satisfy load. If you're familiar with Little's law and you're interested in sort of getting into the details of how this works, or queuing theory, a lot of that applies here. To answer the question with any great detail requires sort of understanding it's not just 10,000 requests, but how long does each request run, how far apart they are, et cetera. The rule of thumb, though, is that any of these serverless functions as service offerings have usage limits. And those limits are designed to essentially limit the risk and exposure from the cloud provider's perspective in terms of the resources they have to have on demand and the surge capacity they have to be able to provide to deliver a quality of service that's good for the end user. And so, 10,000 requests per minute might be just fine, and you wouldn't even notice. What really comes down to is how long the functions will run and how many resources are available in that cloud provider's offering. And if you're within the limits, for example, there might be a per minute activation rate, or there might be a maximum concurrent rate, and usually you expect the response times to be quite low. I don't think any of the cloud providers say what the expected P99 time is for a particular activation. So these are things that actually adopters of the serverless model tend to, when you get far advanced in the development, start to think about, how do I improve my P99 latency? Are there some things I could do to improve the quality of service that I'm seeing out of my functions? The other thing to note is, if you do have a demanding use case, a lot of these limits that the service providers impose are fungible, meaning they can be changed, and they can be changed depending on end users' needs and their willingness to, for example, pay for additional capacity or additional ability for additional capacity or better quality of service. So there's a spectrum here in terms of answers, but I think for most use cases, you can handle an order of magnitude or several orders of magnitude worth of concurrent activations without having to do anything in particular that's different with respect to this model.
All right, thank you for answering that question. We have time for one more question. So Carlos asks, how secure is the connection between Slack and the function? Any concerns transferring financial information from and to Slack? Any custom extensions can be implemented to be more secure, like 2FA? Right.
So hi, Carlos. Carlos and I were friends at IBM and colleagues on IBM Cloud Functions. So the connection from Slack to the Nimbella Commander functions is over SSL, so it's encrypted and secured in motion. The 2FA is an interesting question. I don't know in what context he's asking that, but maybe we could take that offline or on Twitter.
Okay. Yeah, well, other than that, so that kind of wraps up our QA right there. Carlos in the chat gave a peace sign saying, as a thank you. So, all right. So now we'll go ahead and announce the competition that we have. If you'll please go over to the next slide, Roderick.
It should be already presenting.
Oh.
If you don't see it, then you want to screen share then? Go ahead, grab the screen.
All right, let me go ahead and pull it up real quick. Not sure why it's not pulling up. But yeah, so I wanted to go ahead and talk about the upcoming contest that we currently have. So now that you know how to actually build a command set, we are going to be going ahead and giving you an ability to potentially win a $100 gift card from us by creating your own command set. And if you need help, like being able to remember how to actually do that, once this webinar is done, you can actually come back to our YouTube account. You can find this video and rewatch it, learn anything. But also, we have a link that you can follow so you can learn how to build a command set. So let me go ahead and pull up that link real quick. I went ahead and posted the link in the chat. All right. There we go. So here is some information about what we're doing. We got a command set contest. Right now, the deadline is May 26th, which is a week from today. So you have an entire week to create a command set. My advice, so the way we're going to be judging which one will win, we're going to be judging it by popularity. So what you need to do is once you create a command set, I would recommend share it on your social media, share it with your friends who use Slack, and show it with your friends that are sharing your Slack so that they can run the command. And once after a week, when we're done, we will gather the information, figure out whose command was the most popular, and we will announce it not only on our social media, but also share your command set and show exactly what it is you created. So other than that, I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys submit. Roderick, Nikhil, do you have anything you want to add to the end?
Oh, thanks everyone for joining and the questions.
Yeah, same here. Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to go ahead and do this. And this is going to be the start of many more webinars to come. We're going to be talking about, not only doing more introduction webinars explaining what it is, how you can get started, but also bringing in more professionals in the industry to teach you more things on how to build even better serverless applications. So thank you so much to everyone that came out. I hope everyone submits their command sets, because I'm excited to see what you guys build. Other than that, hope you guys have a good rest of the day.